We are at war. The war is for your consent. The war is for control of what the elite-owned media and their financial elite buddies desire. Their aims are the same as Cecil Rhodes' over a century ago. Control over the slaves. What if our world was controlled by problems, reactions, and solutions devised by a global ruling class? That all the crazy panic and events we're seeing in the world today were all connected. And we are all merely players in the game of planned chaos. We're living in a moment when there is a bombardment of media information. People are confused by the plethora of information. Whom should they believe? Facts are spun to present a particular narrative. Who can be trusted? One thing to remember is that the mainstream media is produced and has largely been broadcast over the years on television. We watch programs. The media use programming to control the narrative and minds. History is written by the victors. What's important to understand is that there is a carefully orchestrated organization behind much, if not all, of the media narrative. It is not just random entertainment.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
From a United States perspective, there has been a consolidation of media so that there are only now 6 major media corporations. That is quite a narrow lens from which we receive our information. This came about because of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, where media companies consolidated that once numbered over 30,000 independent media outlets, from newspapers, local papers, radio, and TV stations. These various news providers used to be held to higher standards and were often kept in check by libel or slander suits and a more informed public.
When it first came out, Clinton touted the act as a way to open the market to competition. In reality, the act allowed for massive deregulation and media consolidation, unlike anything we've ever seen. It's allowed media companies like Sinclair to consolidate into the giant behemoths they are today. If you think the government doesn't like this consolidation, you're wrong. If you think it's a mistake, you're wrong. Why? Because it's a hell of a lot easier to control the narrative of 3 media outlets instead of 300. And that makes it easier to control the masses.
This Telecommunications Act changed those standards, and the effect is what we see now. The news transformed from reporting just the facts.
That's the fact, Jack! That's the fact, Jack!
To a presentation style based on opinion or focused on its entertainment value. Whereas the media used to be known as the Fourth Estate, public fact checkers on Congress, judicial, and executive branches, it became a way to control the public message.
Panic and if we ever Joseph, get back to normal.
Joseph, you didn't panic about anything.
That? What good is it? Why not?
And with social media as an even larger influence, we're currently seeing a vast amount of control in the hands of only a few platforms, where users are subjected to constant censorship. But we live in a free and open society, right? Well, that's the illusion. Right now, high-powered organizations own large media conglomerates, and that scenario leads to the media parroting each other. also known as Mockingbird Media. As seen in the Sinclair Media Group coordinated broadcast warning on the dangers of alternative news outlets.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories are true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
The notion of fake news certainly isn't new. One of the greatest movies of all time, Citizen Kane, shows how powerful one media organization can become.
Now in complete control of the government of this state, I made no campaign promises.
This has always been the case around the world. Based on the real Spanish-American War, where news tycoon William Randolph Hearst infamously told Teddy Roosevelt, "You furnish the pictures, and I'll furnish the war." Media pundits, through the use of their newspapers, act to create the narrative that the highest bidder wants. It's not new that media uses propaganda to sway public opinion to get people agreeable to enter a war. This becomes dangerous when news media outlets are consolidated or the main news anchors and news producers are part of the establishment. Here are some examples. Did you know that MSNBC's news chief's foreign affairs and senior Washington correspondent Andrea Mitchell is married to former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan? Or that Anderson Cooper is the son of Gloria Vanderbilt and a former CIA intern?
I get hired by CNN.
You didn't have any journalistic training except CIA training.
The Vanderbilt family made their fortune as one of the richest families in the U.S. through their railroad empires. They lived like royalty at their Biltmore estate. Do you think they have the same financial and political views that you do? It's a small club at the top, even though George Carlin humorously called it a big one.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club.
This is perhaps intentional to create the boogeyman needed to keep us in fear. One of CNN's chief news shapers is David Axelrod. You'll be seeing a lot of him this election season. Pay attention to how he is revered by his associates. He's often guiding the narrative. Speaking of railroad tycoons, it's important to note the late tycoon Cecil Rhodes. Rhodes was the ultimate racist. Rhodes was the hand of the Queen. He also was a Vanderbilt contemporary. He was a British railroad tycoon whose railroad empire stretched across the African continent. He did a lot to enslave Africa and expanded the British Empire, so much so that one country that he controlled used to bear his name. The country was Rhodesia. The country is now once again called Zimbabwe. His racist atrocities went so far that he pillaged the land. What did he gain? Blood diamonds, railroads, colonial expansion, oil, slavery, all for the benefit of the mighty British Empire. But he didn't just exploit the continent of Africa. His reign of conquest was for crown and country. His racist policy of the ends justify the means endures until today through his endowment to Oxford University via the Rhodes Scholarship that bears his name. This scholarship is awarded to those who might follow in the footsteps of his ultimate goal of returning the colonies back to the crown. Now, this may sound crazy, but it's well documented. His well-calculated strategies to accomplish this were to train candidates in subversive tactics and to defy any laws that created an impediment to his ultimate goal. He created not only the scholarship, but also the secretive British Round Table, and was the inspiration behind the Club of Rome and the Council on Foreign Relations. We use him as an example because there is a conflict of interest of mingling private policy and public media all the time. One devout Rhodes Scholar is MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. Another is George Stephanopoulos, and also Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker, Susan Rice, and Bill Clinton, among several other high-profile people. Remember the small club? It's important to note that subversion and infiltration is subtle, so you need to know their strategy and what motivates it.
Brzezinski said in 2 Ages, now this guy was way up with the NSA. He's a master geopolitician. He admits he works in 20, 50-year periods to do with geopolitics in other countries. But he said himself, the public will shortly be unable to think or reason for themselves. It was meaning by the form of information that was given to them, the type, the formulas that were in use then in the 1970s. He says, eventually they'll be unable to think or reason for themselves. And eventually, he said, they will expect the media to do all their thinking and reasoning for them.
We'll cover this more in depth in other episodes. But remember, the elite, the 2% who control the 98%, don't share the concerns of the 98%. They think of themselves as better than us and consider us slaves and property. So, who are today's Cecil Rhodes? Many follow in his footsteps. How about Jeff Bezos? He owns the Washington Post, who, along with the ultra-rich Ox family, who own the New York Times, shape public opinion. Do you think they use their newspapers and news stories to stack the deck with articles and op-eds that support their political and financial views? You bet they do. Is this openly publicized policy? No. But how hard is it to control the editorial suite at these papers and dictate the direction of the news? This is called manufacturing consent by Noam Chomsky. We know that newspapers and news stations around the world are stacked with bias. In the U.S., this came about because of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which also changed rules on libel. It's much harder to bring about lawsuits as a result, as news can be considered entertainment. And with Section 230 of the Act, publishers now aren't held liable. But lately there's been lots of talk about changing the wording of Section 230 to bring it up to date with online social media platforms.
YouTube, which is owned by Google, is a private company. Can't they do anything they want? The answer is yes and no. Yes, if they are a publisher. No, if they are a public forum. So what's the difference? This gets right to the nub of the matter. A publisher chooses the content that resides on its site. The New York Times is a perfect example. You can't write a story and just expect the New York Times to publish it. The Times chooses what appears on its pages or website. And if they publish a story that contains a malicious lie or violates copyright law, they can be sued. PragerU is also a publisher. It decides what material gets placed on its website. Most sites are publishers. In contrast, a public forum, which can be a physical location like the classic town square or a shopping mall, or a virtual location like a website, is a place that must allow individuals and organizations to exercise their free speech rights. YouTube is an example of a public forum. In fact, YouTube describes itself as a public forum. You make a video, YouTube hosts it, and anyone with an internet connection can watch it. Facebook is also a public forum, and so is Twitter. Here's why this is so important. A public forum under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, a law co-sponsored by Democrats and Republicans and passed by Congress in 1996, is not subject to liability for content placed on its site. If someone posts a video about how to build a bomb or writes a threatening comment, the public forum website cannot be held legally responsible for that content. That's a good thing. It gives YouTube and other public forums the chance to host a wide variety of material, from nature videos to political diatribes, without fear of being sued. And it worked. And then it didn't. A few years ago, the social media giants, Google, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, started to behave not like public forums, but like publishers. They stopped following Section 230, which specifically requires that these websites promote a true diversity of political discourse, and began to judge content by their own political and social criteria. In other words, the social media giants want it both ways. They want the protections of a public forum and the editorial control of a publisher. We're fine if they're a publisher, and we're fine if they're a public forum. They just can't be both.
Furthermore, the 2013 National Defense Authorization Act slipped in language permitting the use of propaganda in the media. The news media's role is to control the news.
Dangerous, edges here are that he's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts, and it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think, and that is our job.
Yeah. But they also come under moral and motive questions. This segment by Mickey Willis, who created the Plandemic documentary offering the other side of the coronavirus story, well explains how fact-checkers are largely nothing more than biased propagandists.
Now let's take a look at a few of the most commonly used fact-checkers, beginning with Snopes. The husband and wife duo of David and Barbara Mickelson founded Snopes.com in 1995. They have no journalism background or training whatsoever. They built their fact-checking empire by using Google as their primary verifying source. The Mickelsons divorced in 2015. Barbara sued David for embezzling money that he had allegedly spent on prostitutes, as well as a lavish honeymoon with his new wife, who worked as an escort in Las Vegas before joining the Snopes cast of characters. In 2017, David Mickelson's new business partners filed a lawsuit accusing Mickelson of multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Snopes proclaimed to be the internet's go-to source for discerning what is true and what is total nonsense. Yet one glance at their history of fact-free checking tells another story. When Dr. Mikovits claimed she was arrested without a warrant and jailed without a charge, Snopes rated her statement false. Had they bothered to explore the arrest documents, they would have seen that indeed there was neither a warrant nor signatures to officiate a charge, a fact that I confirmed with members of Dr. Mikovits' legal team.
Was there a search warrant? No.
And was she ever charged?
No. Never charged with a crime.
100% correct. Judy has never been charged with any crime.
Facebook's fact-checking arm, PolitiFact, is owned by the Poynter Institute, which has received substantial funding from big pharma allies such as Google and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Like Snopes, PolitiFact has a history of misleading the public. In late January of 2019, PolitiFact, Snopes, and FactCheck.org raced to squash the notion that coronavirus and its treatments were patented. They reviewed only 3 of the 4,452 publicly available patents, which unmistakably show that SARS coronavirus detection and treatment had been widely patented by both the public and private sectors.
Facebook's founder pledged to the WHO, saying they would remove false claims and block exploitative ads.
They're working with the World Health Organization and with the NHS, so they have a hotline, if you like, from those official sources.
And if we actually fall prey to propaganda, then what do we do when real journalists are threatened?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to people forgetting what principles are and why they're important.
Yes.
Right? You can hate Julian Assange. You can think Julian Assange is a puppet of Russia. You can think he's the worst person on earth, right? He's a reincarnation of Hitler or Stalin or whatever. And still realize that convicting him harms you. It harms your society. It harms your children's future. People forget about this in today's world where everything's become partisan. But the ACLU cut their teeth. They made their reputation on defending a Nazi march through a Jewish neighborhood. And this is because it's about the right to assembly, the right to freedom of speech. You do not have a right to be free from offense, right? There is no constitutional right to a safe space. But that doesn't mean you do nothing. That doesn't mean you have no opinion. That doesn't mean you have no political power. What it does mean is that you have to recognize that everyone has the right to their own opinion, even terrible opinions. What we have to protect is the speech, is the platform, is the assembly, is the association, is the process.
Some countries have erected electronic barriers that prevent their people from accessing portions of the world's networks. They've expunged words, names, and phrases from search engine results. They have violated the privacy of citizens who engage in non-violent political speech. These actions contravene the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which tells us that all people have the right to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers.
Proving the point is the case of Covington High School student Nick Sandmann, who you remember was slandered when he was bullied by papers around the country for wearing his red MAGA hat. Though liberal media won points on public opinion, Sandmann settled a $250 million defamation lawsuit against the Washington Post and also settled with CNN for an undisclosed sum. How many times in recent history has the media lied to us? Their job isn't to tell the truth, but to protect their own ownership class. Nazi Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels said, "Tell a big enough lie over and over again, and people will eventually believe that it's the truth." Manufacturing consent is a tactic of control. Mainstream media have been monumentally wrong about the most repeated stories on their airwaves. But that doesn't stop them from repeating them. Here are some examples. Hillary Clinton was supposed to win by 95%. At least. Some had her at 98% or 99%. Trump was a Russian colluder. The Mueller probe was going to bring down President Trump. Adam Schiff had overwhelming evidence to impeach President Trump, and Trump was going to bomb the world. So how have those stories turned out? And furthermore, what stories have been missing from the mainstream media that those on the alternative media are well aware of? Where's the coverage been on human trafficking? Where's the coverage been on black crimes or black on white crimes? Why has no one asked the president who Q is? Where are the voices of those who know of child abuse? It's an 800,000 child a year question and $1 billion industry. Why has the media organized against COVID stories like hydroxychloroquine and zinc, or natural preventatives like vitamin C, vitamin D, fresh air, and sunshine, especially in the face of overwhelming evidence from physicians? Why is there a concerted effort to censor independent journalists? Could it be that the people are finally seeing the news media for what it really is? A propaganda machine? Why does it resonate with so many people when they're called fake news? Why are mainstream media viewership numbers plummeting? Why are citizen journalists on the internet gaining so many viewers? Why are audiences turning away from the mainstream media? If they were doing real journalism in the face of a pandemic, wouldn't an inquisitive journalist be able to follow a lead and report on possible cures instead of being silenced? This series will ask these types of questions that, at the very least, we need to consider. Researching is an intelligent pursuit. Seeking truth is necessary. Exploring different avenues and narratives is an intellectual imperative, if only to debunk a theory. Theories in themselves are good things. Einstein theorized on relativity until he could prove it. Newton theorized on gravity until he had his equation. From questioning things comes enlightenment, and this is the basis of scientific method. Let's quickly look at how the media operates by taking a look behind the curtain. Here are their rules. Lying by omission. What isn't being shown on nightly news is generally more important than what is. Control the debate. Who is arguing for and what cause? Most commentators are vetted with accepted points of view. Newscasters are groomed to play the game. Getting a network anchor spot isn't achieved by merit alone, but by which narrative you will support. There are only 6 corporations that own all media outlets in the U.S. They protect themselves. Scripting and synchronizing the news. Anchors often read the news verbatim from city to city, station to station. I mean, what? They don't have journalists anymore. Not so much, just people who read the news that look good on TV and get paid very well to do it. Politicize everything. Everything is calculated to further the controller's divide and conquer tactics. Conservatives versus liberals, Democrats versus Republicans, right wing versus left wing, right versus left, whites versus blacks. Label everyone. No one is a human being anymore. Now everybody is a label. You are a conspiracy theorist if you question the official narrative. Remember Bernie the socialist, Trump the reality show actor, Clinton the first woman presidential candidate, sleepy Joe Biden. Ask the wrong questions and answer questions that weren't even asked. Have an interview on a current topic, but ask irrelevant questions and get into an argument while avoiding any real issues. Closing the book too soon. The jury may still be out on an issue, but the media makes up its mind as soon as they can fit it into their narrative. Triviality and distraction, aka fear porn. How many times has something escalated to catastrophic levels? If it bleeds, it leads. But does that really affect your life? Not so much directly, but indirectly, you will worry. During George W. Bush's presidency, there was a banner on television every day called the Terror Alert Level, programming people to live in fear for the day at a pre-described level, otherwise known as predictive programming. Then outright lying. When all else fails, just make it up. There will be another network anchor to back you up. Attack, attack, attack. Your point of view isn't so good? Well, accuse your opponent of what you would do or have done. These lines of attack show just how the attacker might think. Give your opposition a label such as conspiracy theorist, or say they're crazy, make them look bad. And then finally, wear them out. Just outlast your opponent. Now, what is the objective? Simple. Propaganda. There's always more to the story, as we'll try to show you. We bring this up because we are in a blitzkrieg of informational warfare. Simple as that. We are at war. The war is for your consent. The war is for control of what the elite-owned media and their financial elite buddies desire. Their aims are the same as Cecil Rhodes' over a century ago. Control over the slaves. As one observant poster said, I would rather post an erroneous news story by a citizen journalist made in good faith than an intentionally skewed story by the corrupt and dishonest mainstream media. So get ready to dive into deep information. Bring an open mind. Truth has a resonance. You'll learn a new perspective to challenge the narrative. We at Prepare for Change have been reporting and presenting this information for almost a decade. We gather the information from high-level sources and have thousands of articles online at prepareforchange.net. Our site isn't for everyone. It is intended to help those who question the narrative or want to explore history or challenge the mainstream. We are often paddling our boat up that mainstream. But due to the many hundreds of great writers who's lost their jobs in the media consolidation, the information is out there. The truth is best hidden in plain sight. We strive to show you how to sort through it. With a sound basis in history and through whistleblowers, intelligence agents, and reporters who sometimes make the ultimate sacrifice, we have tons of support to stand on. The time is critical to make this series that will bring together the methods, the actors, the religious beliefs, and the stories to put a spotlight on darkness and provide some sense from the planned chaos.